Lully, the Coventry Carol, dates from early 16th century England. It was written as a part of a mystery play called The Pageant of the Shearmen and Tailors, which depicts the part of the Christmas story in the Gospel of Matthew known as the Massacre of the Innocents, in which Herod the king has ordered that all male infants under the age of 2 in Bethlehem be killed because he has heard that a new king has been born there. In the play, Lully is the lullaby the Hebrew mothers sang to their babies to keep them quiet, so Herod's henchmen might pass by. 100 years later, in England, with the rise of Puritanism, Oliver Cromwell and his followers led a wave of religious reform aimed to rid the public of decadence. And so, they canceled Christmas, believing it to be simply an extension of the pagan revelries of the winter solstice. And they were correct. The ways Christmas was celebrated in that time was not like the Hallmark Christmas card we grew up with. Christmas in that era was indeed more an excuse to party with scarcely a hint of religious observance. Now, on this side of the Atlantic at about the same time, the English separatist pilgrims that came here were even more strict in their beliefs, and they took the banishment of Christmas even farther. So it was that in 1659, the celebration of Christmas in New England was actually made a crime. Anyone daring to exhibit the Christmas spirit was fined 5 shillings. It was illegal to mention St. Nicholas's name, or to exchange gifts, or light a candle, and singing Christmas carols was expressly forbidden. Now, there were vestiges of Christmas as we still practice it strewn around early America, as cultures immigrating here made their way around the Puritan edicts. The 17th century Dutch immigrants still told the legend of Sinterklaas. In 1804, the New York Historical Society was founded with St. Nicholas as its patron saint, and under that honor and that guise, people exchange gifts. In 1812, Washington Irving, writing under the pseudonym Diedrich Knickerbocker, published a story about a character called Nicholas who rode over the treetops in a wagon. It was also along about this time that a Unitarian minister, the Reverend Aaron Bancroft of Worcester, Mass., stood up and advocated for Christmas as a time of charity toward the poor, and framed the telling of the story of the birth of Jesus as deliverer of those oppressed in this world. And then in 1832, Clement Moore, another Unitarian, invented the Santa Claus we know now with one single poem called "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." In stark rebellion of Puritanism, it was Unitarians who also brought back to life the German tradition of decorating evergreens, but with a new twist. They brought them inside the house. The first one specifically into the parlor of the family of Charles Follen in Boston. He was a German immigrant, a Unitarian, and the first German professor at Harvard. Another Unitarian, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, famous for writing the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, advocated for another German tradition to teach children generosity by them giving gifts to their parents, not just waiting for their parents to give them gifts. Oh, and if you toast your tree with "God bless us everyone," the words of Tiny Tim in Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, a treatise on social justice, if ever there was one, You can thank the heritage we celebrate in this room for that, too. Charles Dickens himself was a Unitarian. And so, the spirits of our true nature come to teach us in his story, published just prior to the Civil War. Now, before the Civil War, the North and the South were as divided about Christmas as they were about the question of slavery. Many Orthodox Northerners still saw Christmas celebrations as sinful and hedonistic. But folks in the South saw Christmas as the most important church and family social event of the year. In fact, the first 3 states to make Christmas a legal holiday were in the South: Alabama in 1836, Louisiana and Arkansas in 1838. In the 1860s, the illustrator Thomas Nast made his name creating images of Santa for the Christmas editions of Harper's Magazine. We still reprint those to this day. But did you know that President Abraham Lincoln engaged Nast to create a drawing of Santa with Union soldiers, designed to be demoralizing to the Confederate Army, and thus one of the earliest instances we have recorded of psychological warfare. It wasn't until June of 1870, in the wake of the end of the Civil War, that Christmas was declared a federal holiday. Now, throughout all of this history is the thread of the tradition of singing carols. Carols have been sung since before recorded history, since before the time of the historical Jesus, and long before the establishment of Christianity as a religion. The long arc of human history shows carols were abundantly and robustly sung, but needless to say, they were not Christmas carols. They were pagan songs, sung around fires and stone circles to celebrate each season. Then, when early Christians took over the pagan winter solstice to create Christmas, they needed to give people new songs to sing. One of the earliest we have a fragment of is dated circa the year 129. It was written by a Roman bishop. Interesting, Christmas waxed and waned throughout the first millennium, till St. Francis of Assisi began his mystery plays like the one we started with earlier. He started them in the 13th century. Now, except for fragments of that time that we have in Louis Lully and some of the other plays that were preserved, most of that music does not survive, lost to cultural fluctuations and the effects of the Puritans banning Christmas carols. Except, no law can keep people from singing.
Yes.
Can I get an amen on that?
Amen.
Even when Christmas was criminalized, people kept singing in secret. They gathered in one another's homes to feast and exchange gifts and sing. And children started going house to house to house to sing Christmas carols because they could outrun law enforcement if they had to. And so it is that the family style of Christmas celebrations we know was established as a repudiation of the criminalization of Christmas. So the Christmas carols written and sung from the 14th century to the 1700s, 18th century. All of those, many of which we still have, especially ones written in the Victorian period, think about this, they are, in fact, acts of religious sedition. They are protests of unjust laws, of religious persecution, and a rebellion against the temptation to unite church and state. Think about that for a minute. Here in this Unitarian Universalist congregation this morning, this faith tradition founded on heresy and rebellion. This, with our history of changing the words to hymns and songs with the waves of our theological evolution and revolution. We, who sometimes wrestle the traditions we inherit, we tussle with their strictures, we reject creed in favor of deed and dogma for the sake of liberation in body as well as spirit. So, this morning you will also find that we did not use our hymnals adaptations of Christmas hymns, because in this hymnal we theologically adjusted their texts. This morning we returned instead to the more orthodox settings of their original authors, and we will do the same tonight in our Christmas Eve service. Because are we really free to change the words? Now, sometimes, and when the author himself or herself engages it, but not when it obliterates the cultures and the intent of their authors. That's called colonization of music. That's moving into someone else's culture and saying, I know a better way. And we've done that a lot. Now, we would not think of changing the words to Jewish Seder hymns. We would not change the words to Kwanzaa songs. We would not change the words of Buddhist and Hindu chants. So why would we feel we could presume to change the words of Christmas carols? Christmas as we have it is a Christian holy day. And when we realize that the very act of early American Christians singing these songs was, at one time in our history, an act of people rising up against theocracy. Luckily, there are some songs that we now traditionally sing at Christmas that need no editing at all in this regard. These are the ones that are still tied all the way back over the millennia to Christmas's pagan relationships. Oh, by the way, my father's parents were modern-day fundamentalist Christian Puritans who did not celebrate Christmas. Well, until we grandkids were of an age that we noticed. And about that same time, they noticed that we didn't have a whole lot of relationship with them up until then, thanks in part to this and others of their more Puritan ways. And then all of a sudden, December, I was about 9, I guess, we were invited to Kansas to decorate their Christmas tree. Not at all because they had decided to believe in the Christmas holiday, but that they had realized family relationship took precedence over their orthodoxy. They decided their love for their grandchildren was far more important than being right. There was one Christmas song they still preferred we didn't sing around their newly adopted Christmas tree. A really pagan one. The one we sang earlier. Deck the halls with wraps of holly. Fa la 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 la. Now, isn't that a seditious lyric? Then I started learning to play the guitar. And one Christmas I sang for them, "What child is this?" And I remember the moment that our hearts changed together. And we stopped resisting each other. May we hope for that in this season, that families gather together, bringing with them the mess that families bring. And may I remember that to be in relationship is more important than being right.